And hello, everyone. Thank you for being with us. My name is Jack Lett, Director of Graduate and Post-Traditional Initiatives for Capture Higher Ed. Don't let my title fool you. You are in the right place for Capture's undergraduate-focused webinar today. That said, I would be remiss if I did not point out that Capture's next webinar, Graduate Engagement During COVID-19, is next Tuesday, April 7th. So for those interested in graduate recruitment and enrollment, we would be happy to welcome you to that discussion next week. It is my pleasure to introduce my colleague and counterpart, Capture's Director of Undergraduate Initiatives, Jamie Gleason. Jamie, welcome.
Thanks, Jack. And for everyone who's listening in, thank you so much for taking time out of what I know is a busy schedule right now to sit with us. Today's webinar is going to cover an immense amount of ideas. Like Jack and I and our team in market development at Capture has been listening not only to the ear on the street, but also lots of learning opportunities that are coming our way. And what we're trying to do in this half an hour is throw a lot of ideas your way. Hopefully, the end result will be that you'll have the opportunity to think through some of them and also be able to execute some of them at the end. But we all know that is not going to be possible to execute all of them. So hopefully we can give you the breadth that you want. We're here today because the season's different. We have all been a part, and we are viewing in front of us a part of history. It's before our very eyes. There's a part of it that's very scary, and there's a part of it that's very exciting. I think that when I consider the outcome of what higher ed will look like when this is complete, it'll be very different. And I think that's a number of months down the road. But as we are right now, what we want to be able to do is address some of the challenges that we're seeing emerge right now, especially as they relate to yield. The challenges, however, are not just about yield. The challenges are economic. The headlines have been very hard to swallow. Not only are we all personally watching things that are going on in our state, in our county, potentially in our family, with our staff team, et cetera, with health-related issues, but we also have this potentially very bleak future that we have to think about when it comes to the economy. And higher ed is obviously not going to be immune to that. And we want to be able to help you hopefully take those challenges on and be victorious. Here's the reality, all right? An industry that is highly routinized, highly scheduled, highly, operationally calendar driven, has been forced to operate in a very different paradigm. We've been stripped of admitted student day. Our spring open house for our underclassmen is not where we want it to be. And the deadline that we often use as our line in the sand has been changed. This is among other things. The very fact that we are not together itself offers a very real difference to the camaraderie, the sense of being able to take on a challenge together. I mean, there's an assortment of different obstacles. And at the end of the day today, what we really hope is that you'll be able to take these 5 conceptual ideas that we put out in front of you and be able to apply them to your paradigm at your institution for your success. So here are the 5. No animation here. This is just straight up 5 things that we think, 5 concept areas. There's going to be about a bunch of subpoints under everyone, so don't think that you've got it all right now. The 5 big ideas that we think are critically important right now as we think about this field season. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a deep dive into all of these categories, give you some tactical things that you can use, some tricks and some tips and some ways to potentially change the paradigm that's going on with your team right now. So let's start. We have 25 minutes to go. We want to be very cognizant of the time. We also want this time for you to be very useful. So I'm hoping to get through all of my notes. I'm scared because doing a lot of slides in a short amount of time is a challenge.
That's why I'm keeping my mouth shut, Jamie.
That's thank you, Jack. I appreciate that. I appreciate your support that way. So let's dig right in. So the first thing I think is really important is it hopefully very obvious. But I also say that knowing that there are times when things are, potentially obvious and we think that we should do them, but we don't always stop to take time to think about them. I came across this quote during my prep for this webinar, and it's taken from an article called "Why Virtual Admissions is More Than Just a Virtual Tour." And oh my goodness, like, does that synthesize where we are right now or what? There's this unbelievable ability to just think of admissions the way we're doing it and think it's really wrapped into, okay, we've got to do a virtual acceptance student day, we got to do a virtual tour, we got to get all our virtual set up. But really there's this other big factor. Pay attention to the underlined lines in this. The most transformative experience is that we listen, that we give space to ask questions, and that we offer support. In the news, and I'm tempted by my own behavior to do this, it's very easy to kind of go down this wormhole of like the bad news. But really, in the challenge that we face right now is that we have to understand, like, what are our students going through, and not only our students, but what are the influencers in their life going through that might be impacting not only their summer or even the school year that they're in right now if they're graduating seniors, but what are we looking at in terms of the months ahead, potentially the years ahead, and how do these few months make an impact on that? And I think the ability to listen and ask questions is critical. First question that I think is important, and I put this out here for, if I had to say, I didn't rank order my 5 tips and tricks, but I think that, first of all, it's very important for us to empathize with our audience. And I'm going to use the word audience there because I think during the course of this webinar, there's going to be a few different things that we go into. But it's very important that we empathize with the audience that we're talking with. So first of all, let's understand the impact that COVID is having on our student who's an admitted student, accepted student, and maybe even their family that they represent. What's going on directly with them? Let's be human together. Let's not make this just about the transactional. We need to know where you stand, but let's make sure that we take time to listen to the direct impact that's going on with that student, because that is the big difference. Let's also understand, though, and be very cognizant that one of the things that we are all yearning for right now is this connection to our campus that admitted student day often brings. It's emotional. It's there's camaraderie. There's a sense of socialization that we right now aren't experiencing. These questions, I think, are critical because what they help you do is iterate your message, and you get to frame up your responses by these things that your staff are collecting for your admitted students. So make sure that you understand, hey, what's the biggest thing that they're missing out on? What's the thing that they wish that they could be a part of that potentially they're not? And then flip that toward the future and think, how do I capture that essence, and how do I replicate that? Let's understand where their persistence, where their preferences lie. Are they still considering you? We've all seen statistics out there that are kind of scary in terms of where our current students might be looking, where the students that we thought were on board might now be thinking closer to home or online education modality. Like, let's not be afraid to have the hard conversations about understanding persistence. Let's also make sure that we understand, are there any other roadblocks that might get in the way? Hopefully this question is already on that you might know, like, is there a waiting list that they're looking for or waiting for? Because this could have an impact, obviously have an impact, to your group later on. And then finally, let's have the straight up elephant in the room conversation that's linked directly to the economy. Like, what are the conversations that are going on around the dinner table relative to finance? Because this is going to be a critical difference maker when it comes to your institution being able to have an open and transparent conversation, and it might be the thing that changes the direction of that student. So better to ask these questions now and understand where they are right now, and use them as a backdrop to frame up your communications and frame up your efforts, rather than have them be question marks and then wonder where the student's going to be, 6 weeks from now or 4 weeks from now or what have you. So make sure that you take time to empathize, and also let's make sure that we're taking time to look ahead. I think being human, and understanding the real issues that are at hand is critically important. The next one I want to talk about is empower. I feel like, if anyone's gone through an MBA program, the word empower always elicits these feelings to me of like, okay, I'm going to have this unbelievable authority, and I'm given license to do this and that and this and that. Obviously, like we want to check that. You have staff members that are young professionals in some cases, but I also think there's an advantage in that. We are looking at a period of time that is unlike anything we've ever faced. And we've all seen in the midst of what's happening in this pandemic, technology is the victor. Technology is the thing that is allowing people to continue. We are seeing, great advances when it comes to like online modalities and all these other things that are happening. And in like manner, your staff, who I'm 42, so I feel like I'm on the old side of things, but there are staff members that you have, maybe some listening to the webinar today, that have ideas on how to create a connection with students that I don't get. I don't understand because I don't use the tools. So I'd encourage you, as you're managing people, as you're thinking through what your time looks like as a team, take time to allow the green light session to happen. And I would even say, don't just take time, like mandate it, like allow people to speak freely, to give ideas. This isn't because you're going to take every idea and implement it, but it's to help your brain, help the different things that are going on, the different modalities that are out there, help them become a potential part of the solution. Make that a real part of your week. And I would even say this should be something that's, weekly. The word empower actually in the Oxford Dictionary, though, also has a very different component. There's another part, there's part B of this definition. And that definition is to make someone stronger and more confident in controlling their life. That's a quote right out of the Oxford Dictionary. This period of time that we're in, again, back to the humanity of what's going on, this is happening to everyone. Just because we are the ones making the phone calls doesn't mean that we also aren't having, these very visceral emotional reactions to what's happening. We have fear. And as we all know, admissions people are social. That's most of the time why they got into this role, because they want to be able to share their experience and they want to be able to be social together. And they also are feeling a burden, the burden that's happening not only to them personally, but to the individuals that they're speaking with or texting with or in communication with. Like, this is a real thing. And what I would encourage you to do is take every day, at least 15 minutes a day, have short stand-up meetings face-to-face, where you can, not face-to-face, virtually face-to-face, where you can see the emotions on people's faces. You can see how they're doing, and you can allow them to be together in the way that works right now. And as Jack told me when we were prepping for this, always end on a high. Always end with a challenge, with a time where you can celebrate something together, and continue that time as a team together. Next silo is let's encourage the
Jamie?
pros. Now, yes.
Can I just say, before we get to encourage the pros, I really like what you mentioned there about empowering staff, particularly you're kind of also kind of carrying that narrative of empathy into the conversation here as well. These green light sessions, by the way, one of the things that we're seeing, which is great, is so much testing and innovation that this kind of radical change has necessitated and required. And what will be really fascinating is to see those things that have been developed, those tactics and strategies that will actually endure through this. I think that is one of the great opportunities, is that once things do, quote unquote, return to normal, what is it that's been developed by teams as they've tested and iterated that will actually carry through and will be valuable additions to recruitment cycles in the future? So that's one of the outcomes that I'm looking forward to seeing develop here.
Absolutely, Jack. I totally agree with you. If anyone hasn't read an article that came out in the Chronicle like maybe 2 weeks ago or 2.5 weeks ago, it's called "The Coronavirus Might Be the Black Swan of Higher Education." I'd recommend that article as a follow-up to Jack's thought there. next thing that we have to do, and we all know that this is sometimes difficult when you're on campus, and when it's difficult when you're on campus, it's often even more difficult when you're off campus. But times of crisis bring people together. Encourage the professionals who are a part of your team. When I say team, your institutional team, encourage them to be a part of the solution. And here's a few examples of how this is already playing out. We've seen this, if you Google search higher ed president message COVID or something like that, you see awesome messages from presidents, and they take different shapes. This one from Geneva College on top is very fun. It's a very, we're missing you on campus. It's a very, this is important to listen to. The health messages that are out there, and it's we will eventually get through this. The homepage facelift, and I put that in plural because this is an ongoing task. This is going to have to be a part of what we do as we keep students moving and keep parents on point when it comes to knowing what's happening on our campuses as we get into the summer. But then also, what are you doing in terms of financial aid, webinars, meetups, using the technological tools that are there in order to meet the needs that are coming up? Well, thinking outside the box here, how do you get your orientation groups? And this is probably a little ahead of where it normally would be, but how do you get them involved in the process of meeting students and being a part of those hangouts and those groups that are happening on or that would be normally happening on campus? How do you preemptively get that together? And then student life, how-to videos. I heard of one institution that's doing, here's how you think about parking on our campus, and here's how you get the permit, and like, how do you make this, the modality that's very edible by the Gen Z audience that we're working with. And then advising. How do you help students to know that this is, we're going to get through this, and here, help them to look forward, help them to look into August, help them to see what the future looks like as it relates to their advisor. I'm going to keep going here because this is really where, this is what Capture, this is where we live. This is the space that we live in, because Capture is very much a part of not only watching digital messaging happen, not only ads, but also in email and web-driven messaging, but then also understanding, like, what's the return? How are students responding to that? How are we to get students to, like I said earlier, be a part of the campus feel without being on campus? I keep using the word in absentia, those words in absentia, because I think it's a very interesting dynamic that we're kind of dealing with right now. And then the one on the bottom, the involvement in current classes. So this might not be the case for everyone, but my wife is a faculty member, and she's an education faculty member, and she has students who, in order to get their Pennsylvania teaching certificate, need to do educational hours. She also happens to be an online teacher for a classical middle school, and online learning all the time. And so what she did is basically created a relationship where she was able to get her education majors in to observe her class, because they aren't able to go out into the schools right now and do their practicums and do the time that they need. It's not student teaching, it's just like an observation period. But think creatively about how you can get students into the environment of your campus without actually being there.
Yeah, and it really goes beyond just doing these things. We've been advocating this idea of measuring meaningful engagement for a long time. I mean, we're basically evangelists of that concept. We talk about it on our podcast and in presentations that we give. I mean, all of this needs to be measurable to show if it's working. And by measure, we're talking beyond simply measuring impressions or open rates or click-throughs. Those things can, those things can all be important as a way to measure the most important thing, which is meaningful engagement. Now, we've always been pushing this idea of understanding measurable engagement, of calculating ROI, and really just establishing benchmarks to inform what will be needed iteration in order to attain optimal performance of these campaigns. So don't only do the things, but figure out how you're going to measure engagement.
Oh, absolutely. And more time than at the times like this, it is so critical that we understand that engagement. Like, what is that ROI? And how can we, if something is not performing the way it needs to, how can we move it to a spot of optimal performance, and how can we iterate quickly? This is the time of quick iteration, this period that we are living in right now. Last slide on encourage the pros, and this is really where I get into kind of the like outside help. So I'm a do-it-yourselfer. If you read my description, I'm this kind of, my dad grew up on a dairy farm, so I'm kind of like this do-it-yourselfer kind of person. I love fixing things, but sometimes I need to reach out for help. Sometimes I need the support of a professional outside my own expertise. And this first bullet point really refers in essence to what Jack was just talking about, and what what we do as a company is that we create customized experiences that track engagement, and that we are able to see demonstrated interest. And it's times like this, it's critical to understand who's got the demonstrated interest. Other tools out there in the marketplace, peer-to-peer, near-peer tools, chatbot options, maybe expanding your digital footprint. How can you add more bandwidth to the digital work that you're doing? Or how can you put predictive modeling in order to drive that digital footprint so that you're going to the people who actually have a higher likelihood to return the interest back to you? What about an enterprise texting platform? And again, I said at the beginning, and I know I'm going like, I feel like I'm speaking like 100 miles an hour. These ideas that are out there, like these ideas that we're putting up in front of you, we recognize that these are not, no one has the budget to do all these right now at the end of the fiscal year. But the real question becomes, if we can spend a little bit of dollars right now in order to get 15 or 20 or however many students that makes a difference on your campus by spending a small amount upfront right now when it's critical, then the time is certainly now to do it. And that's that kind of goes against my cheapskate do-it-yourselfer mentality. However, I also know that sometimes it's very important to do that. Engage the influencers. 7 minutes to go before we get to 1:30, but I think parents and guidance offices and things like that are an increasingly interesting segment to look at right now. I did a quick search, parents COVID resources, and as the father of 3 children who are all right now doing school at home, 2 middle schoolers and 1 8-year-old, I got just under 1 billion hits there. And most, as I scrolled through them, and obviously I didn't go through all of them, because I probably wouldn't be talking right now if I were still going through them. But most of them were for primary and secondary. Like basically, there are resources of how do you not lose your mind as a parent right now, now that your kids are not in school. How do you help their educational experience to be helpful? Raise your hand if you are, that you're right now listening in and you collect parent information in your application process, but you don't use it. I see those hands. That's the reality. The truth is we have parent information, and we've often thought about parent resources, but oftentimes we haven't taken the opportunity to develop, the big piece, the print piece, or the mail comp flow or what have you. Now's the time, folks. What I would say though is don't take the time right now to develop this big parent guide, because that's going to take a long time. But let's think creatively and let's think iteratively, because right now it's all about parent comp flow. Like, how do we get little tidbits of information to parents so that they can both ingest it and feel good about the purchase that they're going to be making for their child? VIP letters, getting your president involved, getting deans and department chairs involved, parent blogs. I used to work with we work with an institution that has a really cool parent-to-parent kind of thing, kind of like near peer, but on the parent level. How can you do financial aid calls and meets for first-gen students or for those who have questions about their financial aid package? How do you get ads into the household of the people that you want to impact? We can do that for you. And there are tools that can do that for you. And that's a big part of getting parents on board, that you can help emphasize the message. And then how do you do web campaigns? I'm going to show you on the next slide just an example of one that a mock-up that we made just for this webinar. But ultimately what we want to do is we want to give messages of reassurance, and we want to give messages that things are going to be okay, and that our institution is still a good value and a good bet, and it's going to be here. I put no stats here, and this may be just me, but I'm like stat, like it's just information overload right now on stats. I feel like making personal outcomes personal is about where we should be. So you can put stats if you want to. I mean, that's your call. But I would say it's at a moment like this, it's time for us to be personal. I mentioned web campaigns. Here's an idea. Okay. Again, think iteratively. Think about this campaign as a potential, like maybe 3-week campaign or 4-week campaign. Capture has the ability to put these little, I call them micro forms, but they're called progressive identification forms, used to kind of poll your audience. So let's think of a use case here. This little survey is placed on a couple of pages, maybe your COVID-19 update page. Maybe you have a subsection for incoming students or parents or something like that, like understand what's going on. Maybe it's on the whole domain. This pops up and it helps you to understand, hey, this audience is feeling this way. And in that selection set, it says, I'm a parent of a current student, parent of a incoming student. I'm a current student. I'm an alum. You know, you can have the audiences that you want. Obviously, we made this up for this purpose, but we've used things like this in order to understand, like, hey, what's our audience feeling right now? What are they going through? What are their biggest, fears? And help them to provide that information. And you can do follow-up triggered emails based on this and help you to understand, hey, how do we message back to these folks? How do we help them understand, like, how we're mitigating this situation? Last but not least, I think we should enlist an army. For most of you out there, you had literally thousands of students go home. And if they're anything like kind of my kids are in their middle school experience right now, the pictures on the right typify how they're feeling. They're bored. They have some work to do, but it's, they're missing their friends. They're missing being a part of the social environment that they were a part of. And unlike maybe what they would be doing, going through like resident assistant interviews and getting, orientation assignments and all this kind of stuff, they're sitting there bored. These students are your army. They are your hands and feet. They're waiting for you to call on them to be a part of the solution. So let's take the lemons that we've been handed and let's make some lemonade out of it. We know Gen Z students, they spend tons of time on their mobile devices and they know how to use them quite well. They also are very big, they have, they're video centric. They love video, and they also are very entrepreneurial and they'll try anything. They want to start businesses. They want to be a part of a solution. They want to see and be a part of fixing issues. This is the workforce that we have available. And to be quite frank, I think that they are ready to work. They're ready to go to work for you on this. Now, the logistics part, that's up to you. You get to work on how that can happen, but let's think about how we can use this workforce to be the solution set to the issues that we're handling right now. Here's the arsenal of choice is usually the phone that's right in their pocket, but there's a ton of options, and I have a resource page at the end. You can do this on the cheap. You can build video. You can do things, and here's the battlefield. And I put Facebook in there knowing that Gen Z students don't use Facebook, but again, going back to the influencers, they do, and they still will. So that can be another way. Maybe you get an old dude like me who's a parent or an incoming parent or a current parent and have them do a Facebook segment or something like that. So here's the overview. Holy cow, that's a lot of information. If you have one screenshot to grab from the whole presentation, although it will be emailed out to you, this would be it, because here's the synthesis of what I've covered, the summation. But the final part of this exercise, obviously, is that we have to execute. A colleague one time told me that we always need to go beyond vision to execution, to implementation. And as I have been saying, this exercise is not something where you should be doing all of this. In fact, if you do all of it and don't do any of it well, then you'll probably, that's probably not considered a success. But pick the things that most align with where your needs are. Fill in the gaps. Make sure that you're being reassuring, that you're telling people this will pass, and that you're going to be a part of the other side, that you're going to be there to help their students succeed in life. Alvin Toffler, I stole this slide from a friend of mine who did a webinar earlier. I think this captures it well, because if right now in this very critical time, we are not able to potentially unlearn some of the things that we're used to and relearn some of the things that we need, then we will be lost. and we will not be able to execute according to what we want to do. And just for your, as Emma said at the beginning, today's webinar, we wanted to make it short because we know that right now your time is precious and that you need to go back to the battlefield. I want you to know that for all of you who are capture partners out there, we are here and we are ready to go to work for you. And I know your account executives are doing this battle for you right now. If any of you have questions, my email is right there. I'm most likely going to be the one who responds to any questions that were submitted. I am excited about being able to be a part of the solution. I am a do-it-yourselfer and a fixer. And in times like this, I'm excited to be in your corner. So that is all I have prepared for today. Jack, do you have any final thoughts?
Can you just bring that resources page on screen?
There we go.
There you go. I thought that was some helpful information, and I know we'll be sending this out to everyone who's attending. Jamie, thank you for putting all this together. It was super helpful.
Yes, thank you, Jack. Thanks for being my host. Thanks, Emma, for all the work you're doing. And for all of you who are out there listening, good luck and be in touch.